What's up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Seth, and we are back again with some more Trove to Trove. And today we're going to be taking a look at the new beautiful dragon. Look at this thing. Isn't it amazing? Like, seriously, it's about time that the game ended up actually getting a proper serpent dragon. Especially, you know, that fact that this is years old as a Chinese New Year's dragon. I'm trolling you guys. You want to see what the new dragon looks like? So here's the new dragon. And here's the new dragon. Just kidding. This is the newer dragon. It's just a reskin. So lazy. Like, come on, Dev, seriously, why you gotta do this to us? Like, give us something that's a little bit more worthwhile. However, you folks watching at home, you are going to want to actually get your hands on this dragon for sure. It's definitely very, very grindy, but essentially is going to end up being a free dragon, which we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a bit. But the event that's going on right now, you know, or the event that was going on, depending on when you're actually watching this video, is you're definitely going to want to complete the Remembrance event, because at the final quest chain, you're going to end up getting 25 scales towards this dragon. And this dragon alone, including those 25 scales, took me about 5.5 hours of just non-stop grinding. And I'll kind of show you the methods that I ended up using and give you some of the quick tips of actually grinding this guy. It's essentially going to end up being the exact same method that you use to get the Phoenix mount that we did so many years ago, or however many years ago, or however long ago it was, when the Forbidden Spires biome first got originally added into the game. Now, the Phoenix mount doesn't actually have any fireballs and stuff like that, despite that it is just a reskin of a dragon in the form of a phoenix. But this guy, however, is going to have fireballs, and I actually really like it. It looks really, really cool. It's just the exact same as Shaoran, you know, the lunar Chinese New Year dragon, but it's blue, so you can't really go wrong with it. Blue and purple, absolutely love it. Unfortunately, there's not many costumes for the Shadow Hunter anyways that end up going with it, or many costumes in general that end up going with this dragon. But generally, I like it. You know, compared to the other dragon, I feel that this one is... it's cool. I like it. I actually didn't think that the mount was worth it originally, because originally, you know, again, this is 5.5 hours later of me just solid grinding to get this guy, and it doesn't give you any stats. It gives you power rank, it gives you mastery, and it doesn't give you any stats. But wait a minute, there's more. This actually does give you stats. Yes, that's right. The stats are invisible. Devs have said that it's a bug, and they don't really know how to fix it. So what they are going to apparently do is change the description of this dragon to actually show the stats that it gives. So essentially, this is going to be a dragon, like a full-on dragon that you can end up grinding out of the game, that's not going to cost you dragon coins. And it's not going to give you 250 mastery. But everything else about it, like, it's definitely worth getting, folks, because that means you're going to get 50 magic find, which is going to double if you end up having patron. And then the other stats that I've heard it gives is, what was it, 1,000 to max health, and then I think 500 to magic damage, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that. You know, we'll just have to wait and see. By the time this, you know, if you're watching this video way in the future, the dragon probably has its stats, but originally it didn't. And then this is going to be the error guy. So one of the things that's pretty cool about this whole situation here is originally when the Forbidden Spires biome was added to the game, they mentioned that there were going to end up being a various amount of gods in the form of mounts that we were going to continuously be able to actually get. So it's really, really cool to see that the developers finally followed through on something, because more so than not, whenever they end up setting up these plans for the future, they'll usually end up abandoning an old goal so that they can end up focusing on a new goal. By which I mean, I wasn't expecting to have any other mounts in this section. Now, I don't remember how many they said. It was like 4 or 5, I think, in total. So we're probably going to end up seeing these guys show up maybe once every year or something like that. But the fact that this thing actually is a dragon and gives you the full-on stats means that I definitely recommend that you grind it out. Even if you don't really like the style of it, it's definitely worth going for, because the Phoenix itself is going to just be for style. That's 100% why you're actually going for it, right? So let me actually swap over to this guy right here. Just please don't crash. Please don't crash. There we go. So this guy right here, folks, the reason you grind this one is for the looks, like 110%, because this guy doesn't give you any stats. but it's beautiful, it's unique, it actually has fire video effects for the wings, and it's such an impressive creature. Like, look at it, it's absolutely beautiful. It was a modded item that was added to the game, and it's just the fact that they ended up going the extra mile of adding like the fiery wings and everything about it. Like, it's one of my favorite. I'll say it's a dragon, even though it's not technically a dragon. It doesn't shoot fireballs or anything like that, as opposed to you know, the blue dragon here. This guy does actually shoot fireballs, so this one's actually like a proper dragon. But the thing is, whereas you're grinding the Phoenix just for the looks, this guy you're actually grinding for functionality. Now again, 5.5 hours, that seems like a very, you know, that's very, very time consuming for sure. And top that with the fact that the Remembrance event gives you 25 to the actual scales, right? So if we didn't end up having that initial 25, I'd say that this guy would take maybe 8 hours to grind, depending on how powerful you are and, you know, whether you're going to end up doing this as efficiently as possible. So the Forbidden Spires biome can end up spawning in any of the Uber worlds. The devs ended up acknowledging when they added the Forbidden Spires, which I personally don't like, but they said how we acknowledge the fact that players will, you know, the average player won't even get to U6, which is pretty pathetic, honestly. Like, that's, getting to U6 is like super duper easy. It takes like an hour, like. So anyways, they acknowledge that the average player won't get to use 6, and so because of it, they lazily threw the Forbidden Spires in every one of the portals, which doesn't really make sense, because especially if you end up opening the Trovian Atlas, you can actually just see that the biome originally was designed to end up being for U6. And it's even more obvious because of the fact that when you go into U6, it's going to end up being the one adventure world where the biome you start in is going to be Forbidden Spires, and it's going to generate massive Forbidden Spires biomes. Now, there's a couple reasons why I would say that this thing is definitely worth farming. One of which is just the fact that you're going to end up getting more magic find out of it, and obviously you're going to end up gaining another dragon. But one of the things that you could actually say is a big criticism towards this dragon, I personally think is a good thing, is that the way that you actually get the scales for this guy is just by killing enemies in the Forbidden Spires. Now, enemies are going to end up having a chance of dropping fiery feathers as well. So essentially it means that while you're out farming, you know, this dragon made it so that the fiery feathers are actually rarer, because now anytime one of these guys ends up choosing having a random chance to end up dropping their rare loot, which would end up being fiery feather before, now it's going to have a 50-50 chance of deciding whether or not it's going to drop fiery feathers or it's going to end up dropping dragon scales, which essentially means that, again, the Phoenix is going to take that much longer to end up grinding. But the reason why I like it is because it means while you're out grinding the Forbidden Spires enemies and stuff like that, it means that essentially you're working towards getting 2 mounts. And by the time you end up getting enough scales for this guy, you should be doing pretty good for the fiery feathers, or the other way around. Now, it is completely random. You know, even my time towards this dragon was 5 hours, you know, and 30 minutes. And I think there was like a couple other people that were very, very close to me in terms of the time. I think I was the first person that ended up actually getting this dragon, at least the first person at the end game, because cool enough, I ended up actually topping the power rank chart, which I don't think I'm topping it anymore. Yeah, okay, so I'm conflicting, and these guys are a little bit above me just because they got a little bit more mastery, but otherwise I was the absolute strongest in the game on like 3 of my classes, and I thought it was really, really cool. So anyways, I'll talk about that in another video. So it's really nice that we can end up grinding towards 2 different mounts now at the same time. And anyways, by the time I ended up gaining enough scales for this guy, I had 100 fiery feathers. Now, again, you gotta keep in mind, I still had 25 of this guy's scales to start with, and I already had some fiery feathers just in my storage anyways, because, you know, I personally don't feel the need to actually loot collect them, because you never know when you're going to end up needing a resource in general in the future. And unfortunately, as the Shadow Hunter, it means I had to change my costume, because the aimbot is a red costume, and it doesn't really fit with this guy. But anyways, let's get into how you actually are going to end up farming this, because the generation of the world is going to end up mattering, and just the efficiency of actually farming this. Now, just to put it into perspective, I would honestly say that the Shadow Hunter is probably the best for this. In terms of farming like a specific enemy count, I would always recommend the Shadow Hunter, even when you're farming dragons that require you to kill enemies, because it means that you're going to end up having the range that the other characters won't. So the Neo Ninja is going to end up being faster, but let's just say, for example, we're standing right here. let's just visualize, all right? If you're a Neon Ninja, you got to dash over to those guys in order to kill them. If you're the Shadow Hunter, you can just kill them from over here, and then we can just continue on our merry way. This is the very prevalent when I was grinding this dragon, and Nintendo Gamer, my good friend, he was grinding the dragon at the same time on the Vanguard. I was at like 75 fragments, and he was at 50. Then he ended up swapping over the Shadow Hunter, and then he ended up catching up to me because I had to go and do some errands and stuff like that, right? Now, again, the fact that this is going to end up being completely random, whether these guys are going to drop or not, means that you can't really determine how quick this is going to end up happening, and a lot of this stuff is probably going to end up being superstitious. I generally find that elite mobs end up spawning or end up dropping the scales a little bit more frequently, but that could have just been luck. There's also the giant dragon ogre dudes that you can end up finding in the biome. Generally, I found them to drop the scales a lot more often, and from feedback, it seemed that lots of people were dealing with that as well. So you might want to go out of your way to take on like 3-star bosses and stuff like that that end up actually generating with the dragon enemy itself, right? And then otherwise, this part right here that we're hanging out in, like this generation of the biome, there's a couple different generations that you can end up getting. I think they call them sub biomes now, but that's going to end up being just kind of the standard fields with a bunch of mountains and stuff like that, and it's not bad. But I would recommend that you go to this hill swampland area, if you can even call it that, because the way that enemies generate in Trove is they generate pretty much in an X or a checkerboard manner. Like you can see, we got one enemy here, we got one enemy here, which means that naturally we're gonna have another enemy like over here somewhere. We got one here, 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 and you know, they kind of just generate in X's and kind of roam around the map at the same time. So what I find is that this area right here, I don't know whether or not it just generates enemies more often. I think that it does, or it's just the fact that you're not having to shoot through a bunch of hills, and because of it, you can see the enemies very easily. Like, you know, there's this guy, there's this guy, there's this guy right here, and you just kind of continue through the whole area, farming them as quickly as possible, while also kind of just going in circles. Sometimes you'll end up finding enemies in these areas. Having more jump in this instance also is going to end up making a big difference if you don't have a mount like Gonda, which I generally found to be very useful for stuff like this, because then you can stay up in the air looking down on where the enemies are. Now, you gotta watch out, because as you saw with this guy right here, sometimes the enemies won't show up until you get close enough to them for them to pop into existence, but this is pretty much all I ended up doing. The enemies themselves will end up respawning. Enemies do respawn in Trove. So if you get a big enough generation of this, you can actually just kind of go in circles the entire time and just farm it over and over again if you want to be the absolute most efficient possible, right? That said, I get bored of farming the same circle over and over, so I generally would just go like all the way up in the biome and then come all the way back down and, you know, just kind of repeat as necessary, right? And then eventually you're going to end up getting either this guy or the Phoenix, but either way, you're going to end up being close to getting both of them by the time you end up getting one of them. So again, I definitely recommend that you go out of your way to do this. You can just grind it casually. You don't gotta grind it all at once, otherwise you are going to end up burning yourself out. I am an exception, because I'm a freak and I love this game, right? But if you just enjoy grinding, then hey, by all means go for it, because this is essentially going to end up being a free dragon that you can end up getting that doesn't cost you dragon coins. And that's the biggest thing that ends up holding a lot of people back. So you're going to end up getting magic find out of this, which is the biggest stat that you want to go for, because it's going to end up helping you out in terms of all of your loot and everything like that. So anyways, thanks for watching, everybody. Hopefully you found this video helpful. Don't forget to like, sub, and hit that notification bell so that you can get notified of all the daily videos and stuff like that. And if you want to support me, you can always sponsor the channel by hitting that join button down below or checking the description for my merch store. I still want my merch shirt to show up, but it hasn't yet. Or if you don't have any money, you can check out Gawkbox, which is in the description as well. It's a way that you can end up donating to me for absolutely free, and there's a video that kind of explains that in a bit more detail. Sign on and stay epic, everybody.